Welcome to this Conservation Applied Research and Development, or CARD webinar. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope that you and your families are safe and healthy during this COVID-19 emergency and that everyone is adapting well to our ever-evolving situation, requiring lots of flexibility on everyone's part. Also, we want to thank you in advance for your patience, as this is the first time that we've done one of our webinars with all of the presenters connected remotely. So we hope it goes smoothly and that you'll be understanding of any hitches. So I'm Mary Sue Lopenstein. I'm the R&D Program Administrator at the Department of Commerce, Division of Energy Resources, and with me today is Adam Zoet. Adam is an energy planner at the department, where he coordinates analysis between the Conservation Improvement Program team and other members of the Energy Regulation and Planning Unit. Adam also reviews Utility Conservation Improvement Program triennial plans and annual status reports, and is currently leading an effort to review Minnesota's cost effectiveness tests. He is the project manager on the research that's the subject of today's webinar and will moderate the Q&A portion of today's presentation. Our two presenters today are Dr. Amalia Hicks and Christy Rupper from Cadmus. Amalia has more than 20 years experience in research, study planning, project management, data visualization, and results interpretation. At Cadmus, she leads emerging technology research and pilot program planning and evaluation, manages portfolio-wide evaluation activities, and mediates stakeholder conversations and processes, among other things. Christy specializes in market research and customer engagement research. At Cadmus, she leads the program evaluation on several residential heating and cooling equipment programs and is the project manager for a large multi-year portfolio evaluation with multiple market research and customer engagement studies. Thanks to you both for joining us today. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few webinar basics, which will be familiar to a lot of you who attend these webinars regularly. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. As questions occur to you during the presentation, type them into the Q&A box at the bottom right side of the WebEx panel and send them to all panels. We will do our best to answer all questions within the time allocated, but if for some reason we don't get to all questions, we will answer them after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the department's website at a later date. The slide set from the webinar will also be available at a later date. This webinar is an ongoing series designed to summarize the results from research projects funded by Minnesota's Applied Research and Development Fund, which was established in the Next Generation Energy Act of 2007. The purpose of this fund is to help Minnesota utilities achieve their 1.5% energy savings goal. About $2.5 million of this fund is set aside annually for the CARD program, which awards research grants in a competitive request for proposal process. Results from CARD provide utilities with data to enhance energy efficiency program designs within their SIP portfolios. As you can see by the pie chart here, CARD projects funded to date have been in all building sectors, as well as some that cross all or multiple sectors. The subject for today's webinar is results from a market study which investigated the awareness of and attitudes toward cold climate air source heat pumps in residential households in Minnesota. I'm going to turn it over to Amalia, who will get us started on today's presentation.
Thanks, Mary Sue. Hi, my name is Amalia Hicks. Thank you all for calling in today. I hope you're all safe and holding up well during the quarantine. Also, I apologize in advance for any stray kid or dog sounds that might come through. I'll start off by reviewing the objectives of the research and provide a quick overview of research activities. And we'll briefly review how air source heat pumps work. Then I'll hand it over to Christy to report on key findings, conclusions, and recommendations. The purpose of the study, the 2018 Minnesota statewide potential study conducted by the Center for Energy and Environment and Optimal Energy identified cold climate air source heat pumps, the single largest opportunity for residential electric savings, making up 29% of the cumulative residential 2029 electric potential. So the purpose of our market research study was to understand market barriers and opportunities for increased adoption among residential households in Minnesota. Specifically, the objectives of our study were to assess and understand air source heat pump technology awareness among consumers, consumer and contractor attitudes toward cold climate air source heat pumps, such as the belief that cold climate air source heat pump units don't work in cold climates, perceived benefits that resonate with customers, consumer willingness to purchase ducted or ductless air source heat pumps at various incentive levels, contractor willingness to promote and recommend the technology to consumers, and barriers and opportunities that trade allies face in manufacturing, distributing, and installing cold climate air source heat pumps. The 4 research activities that we performed for this study were a literature review of 11 cold climate air source heat pump rebate programs. 2 of them were in Minnesota, and 9 were in other regions of the country. In-depth interviews with 11 market actors, such as program administrators and other stakeholders, both in Minnesota and across the U.S. We also interviewed 33 trade allies to obtain a broad perspective about the cold climate air source heat pump market. We spoke with 14 contractors and 11 builders across the state and targeted them by the number of standard air source heat pump projects they completed in the last year. Those with fewer than 5 jobs were considered low-volume installers, and those who completed 5 or more air source heat pump projects in the past year were considered high-volume installers. I think that might actually be for the next slide. But additionally, we interviewed 5 distributors and 3 manufacturers. And finally, we completed an online survey with 942 homeowners across the state representing households with different heating fuel types. Okay, so yes, I jumped a little bit ahead on this one, but for the contractor and builder interviews, we targeted trade allies in all regions of the state as defined by the recent Minnesota Potential Study. And then we differentiated them by the number of standard air source heat pump projects they completed in the past year. So this is where the definition of high volume and low volume comes in. Again, greater than 5 installations versus fewer than 5 installations. Our interview sample was drawn from preferred vendor lists provided on utility websites, the Builders Association of Minnesota's member directory, online searches, contacts provided by CEE, and Cadmus's contacts from previous air source heat pump studies. Our online residential surveys were designed to investigate attitudes toward air source heat pump technologies and to assess respondents' willingness to purchase air source heat pumps in the future. We completed 942 online surveys. Eligible respondents included those who were homeowners, lived in single-family or multifamily buildings with 4 or fewer units, and knew the primary type of fuel and heating system in their home. The final response pool contained 804 fully completed surveys and 138 incomplete surveys. We included responses from both in our analysis. To achieve a representative sample of Minnesota homeowners, we partnered with online panel provider Dynata and used a stratified random sample design with a stratification scheme based on urban and rural geographic identities. The final sample included 72% of respondents in urban and suburban areas and 28% in rural areas. These percentages were consistent with those in the American Community Survey 5-year estimates for 2017. As you may already know, air source heat pumps use refrigerant to move heat between internal and external spaces. These figures give a very simple depiction of how air source heat pumps work. The figure on the left shows the unit absorbing heat from the outside air and releasing it inside the home to warm it in cold months. The figure on the right shows heat being drawn from the indoor air and released into the outdoor air, basically working in reverse during warm months. These systems are available as centrally ducted systems that distribute air through ducts similar to a central air conditioner or gas furnace, or as ductless systems that consist of an outdoor unit and one or more indoor units called heads. These heads are typically mounted high on a wall and are connected to the outdoor unit. Now I'll hand it over to Christy to walk through the key findings from our research.
Okay, I think we might have lost Christy. Amalia, can you fill in for Christy while we're waiting for her to come back? Oh, here she comes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Great. Welcome back.
Thanks. Sorry about that, everyone. I don't know if you heard, but my name is Christy Ruper, and now we'll move on to the key findings from our analysis. The Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, or NEEP, and the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, or NEIA, have published cold climate specifications. NEEP and NEIA share similar specifications for cold climate air source heat pumps. Both organizations consider a cold climate air source heat pump as a model with a higher minimum heating seasonal performance factor, or HSPF, than standard air source heat pump equipment. Heating seasonal performance factor is defined as the ratio of heat output to electricity used over the heating system. ENERGY STAR specifications for air source heat pumps have a lower HSPF than those used by NEEP or NEIA to designate cold climate air source heat pumps. The Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, or MEA, has not officially published cold climate air source heat pump specifications for the Midwest region, but a 2018 MEA study defined a cold climate air source heat pump as a model with 10.5 HSPF, which is very similar to the NEEP and NEIA designations of 10.0 for ductless systems. Additionally, NEEP and NEIA both designate that indoor and outdoor units be part of an air conditioning, heating, and refrigeration, or RE match system. There are two differences between NEEP and NEIA cold climate air source heat pump designations. First, the NEEP specifications include ductless and centrally ducted air source heat pumps, while NEIA specifications addressed only ductless systems. Second, NEIA requires that cold climate air source heat pumps maintain 80% of the load it was designed to carry at 5 degrees Fahrenheit without using a backup heating source. NEEP does not specifically include this requirement. Most cold climate air source heat pump rebate programs meet or exceed NEEP's cold climate specifications. Some programs offer incentives for air source heat pump programs, but don't require equipment with a higher seasonal heating seasonal performance factor to qualify for a rebate. They often use ENERGY STAR HSPF requirements. Incentive levels vary from $150 to $2,000, depending on whether the program allows fuel switching, whether the rebate addresses a ductless or ducted system, the system size, or existing heating fuel sources. Most program administrators and trade allies say ductless systems are more commonly installed because they better meet their customers' price point. And most rebate programs are downstream programs, while some programs offer incentives directly to the contractor, who gets to decide whether to keep it or pass it on, and other programs offer an incentive directly to distributors, instantly discounting them when contractors purchase the equipment for end-use customers. Now we'll talk about the response to cold climate air source heat pumps among trade allies such as contractors, builders, distributors, and manufacturers. In general, contractors and builders who completed 5 or more air source heat pump jobs in the past year were aware of cold climate units, while low-volume contractors and builders who completed fewer than 5 projects in the last year were typically not aware of cold climate air source heat pumps. And of course, all distributors and manufacturers were aware of the technology. All contractor and builders except one who were aware of cold climate air source heat pumps had a positive impression of the technology. Ductless installations are more common in existing homes, and new construction allows more cost-effective opportunities for ducted system installations. High-volume installers often promote the technology to customers, but do not install them frequently. Some high-volume contractors say most contractors do not understand the technology and may not be confident in their ability to install and troubleshoot questions from customers. Distributors agree that contractors may lack knowledge about the technology. They speculated that contractors may be biased against heat pump technology, as decades ago heat pumps were often sized or installed incorrectly and did not lead to promised energy savings. Manufacturers felt that contractors don't trust the technology works well in cold climates and felt that training could mitigate this concern. They also expressed concern that contractors who don't trust the technology may not be comfortable installing it. And most program administrators we spoke with indicated that installers are the greatest driver of cold climate air source heat pump adoption. They said gathering contractor feedback when designing programs and developing quality assured protocols, developing education and training programs, and providing them with marketing assistance were the best ways to engage contractors and increase cold climate air source heat pump adoption. Additionally, there was some confusion about performance of cold climate air source heat pumps since there were no industry standards for what is considered a cold climate air source heat pump in most rebate programs. Program administrators suggest designing rebate programs to be flexible enough so they can adapt to market and technology changes. In the online residential survey, we asked respondents if they had heard of ducted air source heat pumps or central air source heat pumps, and 37% said they had heard of this technology. If they had not heard of the technology, the survey then described how the system worked and showed them the image in the green box on the right. After they saw the image and heard the description, an additional 9% of respondents said they recognized ducted air source heat pumps. Then we asked online survey respondents if they had heard of ductless air source heat pumps or ductless mini splits, and 22% said they had. If they had not heard of the technology, again, the survey described it and showed respondents the image in the blue square, and an additional 17% recognized the technology. As you can see, a larger percentage of respondents were aware of ducted air source heat pumps, and awareness increased in both groups when respondents read a description of the technology and were shown an image. The survey also investigated how much respondents agreed or disagreed with statements made about air source heat pumps. The statements focused on home comfort and the ability of the equipment to heat and cool their homes. Respondents who were aware of air source heat pumps were asked the 4 statements on the slide to assess agreement. Agreement was fairly even across statements, although survey respondents agreed most with the statement at the top that air source heat pumps can effectively cool a home in cold weather. A small percentage of respondents did not agree with the statement that air source heat pumps can keep a home warm and comfortable in cold weather, indicating there is some skepticism around functionality in cold climates. We asked respondents if they were aware of cold climate air source heat pumps, and 18% of them recognized the term when it was named and described. However, this group of cold climate air source heat pump aware respondents did not have a high level of familiarity with how the technology worked. The chart on the left side shows respondents' level of familiarity with cold climate air source heat pumps. When asked how familiar respondents were with this technology, 22% of them rated their familiarity as an 8, 9, or 10, 33% rated themselves as somewhat familiar, or a rating of 5, 6, or 7, while 45% rated themselves as not familiar, with a rating of 1, 2, 3, or 4. On the right side is a map that shows familiarity by county across the state. It's difficult to read, but the point is to show you that there really are no regions in the state where respondents rated their familiarity with the technology as high, meaning outreach campaigns should focus on the entire state. We asked the 18% of online survey respondents who were aware of cold climate air source heat pumps how much they agreed with 2 statements. As you can see from this chart, 72% agreed strongly or somewhat with the top statement that cold climate air source heat pumps provide energy efficient heating in cold weather, and 71% agreed with the bottom statement that cold climate air source heat pumps keep homes warm and comfortable in cold weather. This agreement indicates that respondents who are aware of cold climate air source heat pumps do not, in general, harbor concerns about the equipment functioning in cold climates. Program administrators from other jurisdictions, such as Efficiency Maine, Mass CEC, NYSERDA, and Efficiency Vermont, said that cooling-focused messaging is a good way to introduce air source heat pump technologies to customers and pique their interest in whole home comfort. This slide and the next few have a lot of words on them, so before you start reading it, let me provide a bit of context. We used the online respondent survey to complete a benefits test. We used a maximum differences test and regression analysis to identify the most appealing benefits to homeowners. We did not test cost savings appeal, as savings or cost associated with installing air source heat pumps vary across different baseline fuel types. This slide and the three that follow it have a list of all the benefits we tested. We asked roughly half the respondents about ductless air source heat pump benefits and the other half about ducted air source heat pump benefits. The slides show all the benefits in the order of preference share for each equipment type. We aren't going to read through all the benefits, but I wanted to show all of them to you so you could get a sense of which benefits had a higher preference share and which had a lower preference share. On this slide, you can see that both groups rated the attribute as a highly energy efficient electric heating and cooling system as the most compelling attribute. Those asked about ductless air source heat pumps said the second most compelling attribute was that air source heat pumps can zone the home, allowing for more control over comfort in different parts of the home. And those who were asked about ducted air source heat pumps identified the attribute can be used to supplement their existing furnace using smart controls to switch between the heat pump and the existing equipment to optimize energy savings and comfort as the second most compelling attribute. There were some differences between equipment types regarding most and least compelling attributes. This slide shows that respondents who answered questions about the ducted model said the second most compelling attribute was the air source heat pumps supplement their existing furnace using smart controls, while those who answered about the ductless system ranked this attribute in the lower half of attributes. This slide, Sorry, I'm having a technical glitch here. This slide shows that respondents who answered about ducted systems rated the equipment's ability to provide efficient heating down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit as the least compelling attribute, while those who answered about ductless air source heat pumps rated this attribute in the middle. Now the last difference. Respondents who answered questions about ductless heat pumps ranked the attribute air source heat pumps reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the top half of benefits, while respondents asked about ducted models found it to be one of the least appealing attributes. These differences indicate that messaging should be based on existing heating system and fuel type because customers perceive different value propositions when thinking about replacement. Now we'll discuss cost perceptions. Trade allies and program administrators cited perceived upfront costs and the cost of natural gas as barriers. All contractors and most builders agreed that upfront cost is the primary reason customers choose not to install standard air source heat pumps rather than other heating and cooling equipment. They also said the incremental cost difference of cold climate air source heat pumps compared to standard air source heat pumps is a barrier to cold climate air source heat pump adoption. Manufacturers recognized that cold climate air source heat pumps are typically priced higher than standard air source heat pumps, but felt that contractors should promote the benefits of the equipment, including energy efficiency and home comfort, rather than focusing on incremental costs. Contractors and most distributors said the low cost of natural gas and propane was a barrier to promoting the equipment. Trade allies explained that low natural gas prices with comparably higher electricity prices can hinder payback periods for these projects and pose difficulties for contractors promoting cold climate air source heat pumps. And some contractors said that off-peak demand response programs that offer lower electric rates during off-peak times can help offset low natural gas prices. Several Minnesota utilities offer off-peak demand response programs with varying program terms and requirements, which has created some confusion. One distributor said states that rely primarily on more expensive heating fuels tend to achieve more success with cold climate air source heat pump adoption. We asked online survey respondents about their willingness to convert their current system to a ductless air source heat pump. We provided them with information about the cost of installation and the benefits of installing the technology. As you can see from this chart, at the lowest incentive level of $300 or 8% of the system cost, about 70% of respondents were not at all or not too likely to convert their systems to ductless air source heat pumps. At the highest feasible incentive level of $1,000 or 25% of the system cost, half of respondents would likely convert. We asked respondents who were not at all likely to install the equipment, even if they received an incentive that would cover the full price of the system, why they were not likely to install a ductless air source heat pump. And over half of them said they didn't have a need for the system, while 20% said they didn't believe a ductless air source heat pump would effectively heat in low temperatures. We did not detect any differences across geographies, income levels, education levels, years living in the home, or heating system types, but in some cases, attitudes toward ductless air source heat pumps affected a respondent's likelihood of installing a ductless air source heat pump. As this figure shows, at the highest incentive level tested, or $1,000, respondents who agreed with the statement that air source heat pumps can keep a home warm and comfortable in cold weather correlated with a respondent's likelihood to pay for a ductless air source heat pump. Respondents who agreed that air source heat pumps can provide energy-efficient heating in cold weather proved more likely to install a ductless air source heat pump at the lowest incentive level than those who didn't agree with the statement. Generally, if a respondent agreed with any stated claims about ductless air source heat pumps' ability to function in cold weather, they were more likely willing to install ductless air source heat pumps. And this slide is about ducted air source heat pumps. We asked respondents about their willingness to purchase a ducted air source heat pump if their current primary heating system had failed, as ducted systems are usually not replaced until failure. Again, we described the cost involved along with the benefits of installation. About 60% of respondents said they were not too or not at all likely to convert their system to a ducted air source heat pump at the lowest incentive level of $250 or 7% of the system cost. At the highest incentive level of $900 or 25% of the system cost, about 60% were very or somewhat likely to convert. And when respondents were asked, respondents who were not at all likely to install ducted air source heat pumps if the incentive covered the full cost, 25% of them said they would not install the equipment because they did not want to convert to electric heat, while an additional 20% said it was because they did not believe the equipment would be effective in low temperatures. Similar to the ductless air source heat pump findings, we did not detect any differences across geographies, income levels, education levels, years living in the home, or heating system types. But again, we did find that attitudes toward ducted air source heat pumps affected a respondent's likelihood of installing a ducted air source heat pump. At the first two incentive levels, $250 and $500, respondents agreeing with each attitude prompt were significantly more likely to pay for transitions to a ducted air source heat pump than those who did not agree with those statements. This includes respondents agreeing that air source heat pumps can keep a home warm and comfortable during cold weather, as you can see in the chart on this slide. And now we'll discuss program delivery and promotion. Heat pumps in the U.S. predominantly employ a four-step distribution model as a sales channel. This distribution model involves a manufacturer providing equipment to a distributor or wholesaler. Contractors purchase equipment from wholesalers or distributors and resell and install them for consumers. Distributors are responsible for stocking the equipment, so engaging them in the program is important in keeping the equipment stocked, and some programs employ a midstream model that provides an instant discount to distributors to keep them engaged. Contractors are the primary drivers of sales and are critical to increasing customer adoption, especially since manufacturers are less likely to honor product warranties when consumers self-install air source heat pumps. Consumers are the last actors involved in the program delivery, but play an important part in promotion. Word of mouth among consumers provides a solid driver for heat pump growth. And through our research, we found that there are four major categories of barriers to cold climate air source heat pump adoption among residential households. The largest barrier is regarding consumer awareness, contractor and consumer education about the benefits of cold climate air source heat pumps, and contractor engagement. Additionally, there are mixed opinions about the technology and its ability to warm homes in cold climates, which contributes to confusion about the benefits of installation. Cost considerations and the fuel switching ban are concerns as well. As previously stated, residential customers lack awareness of cold climate air source heat pumps, with only 18% of survey respondents recognizing the term cold climate air source heat pump when it was named and described. Responses from interviews with builders underlined this finding, since builders felt that the biggest barrier to installation of cold climate air source heat pumps was customer awareness of the technology. Other trade allies have a high awareness level of standard air source heat pumps, but their awareness of cold climate air source heat pumps and the benefits of installation are high only among those who install a high volume of standard air source heat pumps. Additionally, some contractors do not feel comfortable sizing or installing cold climate air source heat pumps, which leads to less frequent promotion and installation of the equipment. Engaging contractors is important since they are the primary market channel for delivering and promoting the equipment. There are some technology and performance barriers to increased adoption. Program administrators indicated that customers and contractors harbored negative perceptions of heat pumps. Trade allies agreed with this assessment and said some distrust exists among contractors regarding cold climate capabilities. Some are still unaware that heat pump technology has improved and performs well in cold weather and are not promoting the equipment to customers. Survey results also indicate that some residential households do not believe the technology will be effective at low temperatures, but said that a highly energy efficient electric heating and cooling system is the attribute that would most compel them to purchase. Though NEEP offers best practices guidelines for sizing, selecting, and installing cold climate air source heat pumps in customers' homes, program administrators do not widely require their use by contractors. Our literature review indicated more research needs to be done on how air source heat pump technology performs in cold climates, because there's no industry standard test procedure that exists for air source heat pumps below 17 degrees Fahrenheit. Currently, cold climate air source heat pump manufacturers self-report performance data at 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And as previously mentioned, cost considerations such as upfront costs and the cost of natural gas and propane are challenges. Market actors all agree that incentives are necessary, and most thought current levels were appropriate. Minnesota utilities offer rebate programs, but they vary by equipment requirements, incentive levels, and whether messaging encourages air source heat pump systems for heating and cooling. Survey results found that over 1/3 of homeowners would likely purchase an air source heat pump if incentives covered about 15% of the incremental cost. Finally, fuel switching regulations pose a primary barrier for cold climate air source heat pump adoption, according to program administrators, because it is difficult to promote equipment to households without electric heating or cooling. An administrator from the Vermont Energy Efficiency Corporation indicates that in jurisdictions that do not allow fuel switching, states can consider promoting air source heat pumps through a renewable heating and cooling decarbonization initiative sponsored by non-utility program administrators. For example, Massachusetts seeks to supply up to 30% of heating through air source heat pumps statewide by 2030 to achieve its overall 2050 decarbonization goals. Additionally, New York is developing a policy framework to establish renewable thermal technologies, including air source heat pumps' role in the state's carbon reduction targets. And now on to conclusions and recommendations. On each slide, we list a conclusion along with recommendations prioritized by impact. Utilities play an important role in growing contractor and consumer awareness of air source heat pumps and their benefits. We recommend that utilities market directly to customers, that they design marketing campaigns to be educational. The campaign should be geared at increasing the awareness and understanding of air source heat pumps and cold climate capabilities. Campaigns should emphasize non-energy benefits, such as home comfort and increased efficiency. They should consider using imagery to help customers gain familiarity with how the technology works. And they should target different messaging to customers based on their existing heating system and fuel type because customers perceive different value propositions. Utilities should consider a cooling-focused community-based outreach campaign. This can serve as a gateway to air source heat pump program participation. Cold climate air source heat pumps are suitable for Minnesota, but mixed perceptions of their capabilities indicate a need for additional education and training for contractors. We suggest utilities partner with manufacturers and local training institutes to offer cold climate air source heat pump specific training. These training programs should provide multiple opportunities for installers by combining webinars and in-person training. Webinars and online videos can be used to promote sales training and cold climate air source heat pump benefits, while in-person training could focus on proper sizing and installation. Programs should offer in-person training at many locations and provide funding to reimburse contractors for attendance. Utilities should establish a standard installation protocol for cold climate air source heat pump installations in the state and invite contractors' feedback during this process of designing the protocols to get their buy-in. And programs should consider promoting training as a way for contractors to gain continuing education credits. State and regional entities have a vital role in advancing the market through sharing knowledge about the technology, offering technical guidance, and facilitating collaboration. We suggest identifying a state or regional entity that can champion cold climate air source heat pump technology, create working groups with cold climate air source heat pump stakeholders to discuss the technology. Topics for working groups could include standardizing equipment specifications for cold climate air source heat pumps, monitoring industry trends, and sharing new equipment developments with contractors and builders to increase their confidence in the technology. Additionally, participate in already established working groups to stay current with issues and innovations. Although Minnesota utilities already incent air source heat pumps, encouragement of climate-appropriate technology has not been standardized statewide. We encourage all of Minnesota program administrators to support cold climate air source heat pumps and establish a consistent message regarding the technology's cold climate performance. Utilities could consider offering tiered incentives with consistent rebate levels across utility programs to help customers and contractors identify differences in the equipment's performance standards. Utilities should establish common cold climate specifications for air source heat pumps to avoid market confusion among customers and contractors. And utilities should engage manufacturers and distributors early in efforts to increase customer adoption of cold climate air source heat pumps within the state. And varying operating costs can make it difficult for contractors and consumers to justify the higher upfront equipment costs for cold climate air source heat pumps over other heating equipment options. Some contractors said that off-peak demand response programs that offer lower electric rates during off-peak times can help offset low natural gas prices. Several Minnesota utilities offer off-peak demand response programs with varying program terms and requirements. Because of this, we encourage utilities to offer similar requirements for off-peak demand response programs so that contractors and installers can promote the equipment consistently to customers. Customers reported that non-energy benefits such as the ability to zone the home and provide even heating and cooling throughout the home resonated strongly. So we suggest training contractors and installers to promote system performance and non-energy benefits rather than incremental costs and incentive amounts. And finally, a conclusion to address fuel switching concerns. Decarbonization goals may offer the best way to overcome perceived barriers set by fuel switching standards. Minnesota's Next Generation Act set two goals. One, achieving a 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2025, and secondly, achieving an 80% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So our recommendation is to incorporate cold climate air source heat pumps into an action plan designed to illustrate how to achieve the goals set by Minnesota's Next Generation Act. Thank you so much. We enjoyed working with the department on this research, and thanks for joining us as we shared our findings and conclusions and recommendations. And finally, a special thanks to Adam and Mary Sue for providing outstanding guidance and support.
Thanks. Thanks so much for that great presentation. If you have not already done so and have a question, please enter it into the box, the chat box or the Q&A box, and send them to all panelists. Adam, do you have questions for Amalia or Christy?
Yeah, it looks like a number of them have come in. So one question is, are all cold climate air source heat pumps created equal? That is, do they all have the same outdoor temperature rating?
No, I don't believe so. That's not something we really looked into a lot of depth about, but yeah, they're not all created equal. There are some differences, and something that we're suggesting is a little more consistency among the requirements and testing.
Okay. And do stakeholders generally believe that the technology is changing and becoming more effective, and therefore they should wait before promoting cold climate air source heat pumps?
I mean, our research showed that there are some changes in technology, but we did not get the sense from stakeholders that waiting was necessarily a good option, but just to continue promoting and providing technology updates as they're occurring.
Another question was, since the temperature in Minneapolis goes down to like -25, does that mean you can't use these units, or that you should have an auxiliary heating unit?
No, I don't think that's true. I mean, there are cases where an auxiliary heating unit would be useful, but I think it's important to, check into the individual specifications of the equipment to determine if that's necessary. And it also depends on the size of the home and what type of system is being considered and installed.
Okay. This question was related to the willingness to pay findings. If current programs are offering incentives of $2,000, why do you state that $1,000 is the highest feasible incentive level?
We only tested 3 incentive levels. That's not to say that there aren't opportunities for higher incentive levels, but we did look at the other programs that we saw, and we wanted to stay reasonably similar to those programs that we saw.
Okay. And have differential and lower electric rates for sub-metered cold climate air source heat pumps driven more consumers to the technology? For example, some utilities offer a lower rate or off-peak rates for operating the air source heat pump, and will send sub-meters for installers to, or for the installer to assign to the new appliance.
We didn't really research that. We didn't hear from our stakeholders anything about that because we didn't ask any specific questions. So I'm not sure what's happening in that situation.
This is a question about kind of what communities can do to promote air source heat pumps. What can cities and towns do to promote this technology?
Yeah, I think that comes back to just making communities a little more aware about the technology, providing examples, both verbal and image examples of what the technology does, and really focusing on those messages that resonate, the non-energy benefits, the ideas that it can provide heating and cooling, that it can provide even heating and cooling throughout the home, that it increases home comfort. So really just focused on providing that extra education about how the technology works and how it could be beneficial to community homeowners.
Great, thanks. Let's see, can you talk about what the rough incremental cost increases of cold climate air source heat pumps versus a natural gas furnace and boilers?
Yeah, we did a little bit of that research, and there's a more in-depth table in our report once it's published. We did hear from contractors who felt that the difference between just a standard air source heat pump and a cold climate air source heat pump was about 20 to 30% difference in price. But then our additional literature review that we did found that incremental costs range from between 5 and 15% of the cost of a standard air source heat pump. But there is more detail within our report. Once that's published, you can take a look there.
Okay. Another question about how different technologies compare. So how much energy savings would you expect from switching from gas generally?
You know, that's not something that we investigated in our research, so I'm not sure. We didn't provide that. We didn't look for that information, so I don't have a response for that.
Okay. Then question about non-energy benefits. This person said promoting non-energy benefits to me is not to promote a heat pump. Could you please explain this approach?
Adam, could you repeat that?
Yeah, promoting non-energy benefits is not the same as promoting a heat pump. Could you please explain this approach?
Yeah, I think that so what we've found is that survey respondents seem to perceive various components, attributes differently, depending on whether we were talking about a ducted or ductless heat pump. And so we didn't specifically ask about, I guess, specific attributes targeted at cold climate performance, because most people were not aware of cold climate air source heat pumps compared to air source heat pumps. But we did ask, several attribute questions that indicated that respondents do find that focusing on those non-energy benefits, such as home comfort, is something that resonated with them as we were speaking about the technology.
Great, thanks. Was there any discussion with manufacturers on product availability in regards specifically to the cold climate type of air source heat pump?
We did. The distributors, the manufacturers said that they all made cold climate air source heat pumps, and the distributors all said they stocked them, but we didn't go into any other details. They felt like they had the distributors felt like they had enough on hand for their particular supply. But that's as much detail as we went into in the interviews.
Okay. And do manufacturers typically have these models?
Yes, yeah, they do. They do typically have those models. Although there was one manufacturer, and I can't recall which one, didn't manufacture ducted cold climate air source heat pumps. But in general, they all had these models available.
Alrighty. Related to the survey, in the ducted residential survey, was the cold climate air source heat pump listed cost additional / incremental to normal replacement or air source heat pumps?
That is a good question, and I can't recall. I would have to look that up and get back to you about that.
Another question, did you say earlier that a backup system is not needed when temps are below 5 degrees?
I don't know if I can make a specific call on that. I'm not a technical installer. So
yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. We do, through our work with the TRM, have seen that there are frequently backup heating systems for when air source heat pumps are installed. But this study specifically was geared toward market research, so some of the technical questions aren't really within the scope of this particular project. But it is, I think, fairly common to have a backup heating source for these types of systems. Whether or not that's going to prove to be ubiquitously necessary as the technology is able to heat at colder and colder temperatures, I think remains to be seen. But there needs to be more field work, I think, in Minnesota to really nail down what the percentage of installs have, what percentage of installs already have backup heats, and what it looks like in the field right now at the current time. I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. Another comment. Person thought they were great recommendations. What do you think can be done to be sure that they are considered by the state, utilities, and other stakeholders, and ensure that it doesn't sit on the shelf?
Yeah, I think just continued discussion among groups such as these, joining those already out there working groups and continuing to advocate from internal sources, as those on the phone can do, is probably the best way to continue this conversation and keep it top of mind instead of letting it fall by the wayside.
Mm-hmm. Are there areas for further research that you think are really needed related to cold climate air source heat pumps?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ideas. One is to really think about the best way to set up a working group within Minnesota across different stakeholder groups to really try to identify the best practices for doing that. Potentially, doing some participant surveys or other in-depth research to determine how current customers learned about the technology, what their decision-making process was, to kind of piggyback on the research we've already done. Additional maybe propensity or segmentation studies could be done to identify, utilities could use that information to identify which customers are most likely to purchase cold climate air source heat pumps, so they could test out marketing and inform their marketing efforts. Some additional maybe research on how air source heat pump technology performs in cold climates, so that we could establish some industry standard test procedures. Just a few things like that, or other research ideas.
Great, thanks. What would you say is like the single most important takeaway from the results of this study?
I think the biggest takeaway is that increasing awareness and education are really important if we want consumers to adopt the technology. Since consumers are mostly not aware and are specifically not aware of the capabilities to work in cold climates, specifically about those benefits, saving energy, improving home comfort. Education needs to be continued among contractors and consumers so that both can become more familiar, more comfortable, and more interested in installing and promoting that equipment.
Okay. And another question, how will you solve the outside air requirements for a ductless system when there is no outdoor air connection to ductless system?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. Our research didn't really cover those technical specifics, so I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that question.
Let's see. For contractors and builders, was there a big difference in how they promote air source heat pumps and cold climate air source heat pumps?
Yeah, there was some difference in how contractors and builders promote the different equipment. Typically, contractors who promoted cold climate air source heat pumps really focused on the long-term monetary savings from installing cold climate equipment over standard equipment because they felt it saved customers money on heating bills since they had to rely a little less on backup heating systems. In addition to that, in addition to the things that contractors focused on, the monetary benefits and the energy savings, builders also promoted cold climate air source heat pumps' ability to provide greater home comfort. They promoted, more even distributed heating and cooling air and ease of installation. And they also suggested that it gave consumers more freedom in choosing when to use electricity or natural gas within their home. Of course, they were focused on new construction.
Okay. I think this is the last question here. What factors did builders and contractors say impact whether consumers install ducted or ductless heating systems?
Yeah, we didn't really ask respondents about that, but we did talk with builders and contractors, and they generally said that the home's characteristics determine which type of system consumers typically installed in their home rather than what customers thought they preferred. Builders and contractors said that ducted heat pump systems work really well for homes with existing ductwork and for new homes in which ductwork could be installed during construction. And in existing homes, contractors and builders more often promoted and installed ductless air source heat pumps because they felt the system had a better price point. And some of them said that some said that they installed ductless systems because the preferred manufacturer just didn't make ducted air source heat pumps, or they didn't really even know about cold climate air source heat pumps. And then builders were kind of split on which they typically install in new homes. However, builders that constructed homes without basements tended to install ductless units to avoid the extra costs of installing ductwork.
Got it. Well, it looks like all the questions that have come in at this point. Yeah, thank you so much, Christy and Amalia, for all of your good work on this project. I'll kick it back to Mary Sue.
Great, thanks. And I'll just mention that CARD is also funding right now 2 field studies on cold climate heat or air source heat pumps. One of them is in multifamily buildings, and that is going to be looking at ductless heat pumps, and the other one is in residential houses, and that one is going to be whichever works best, as Chrissy said, whichever works best for the characteristics of the house. But there will be backup heat in all of those situations. Those projects are underway, and they're identifying field sites right now, and they're starting to install the modern equipment to do the baseline. But that will look at both performance characteristics of those systems, but also it will work with contractors on trying to develop some guidelines for installation. So those projects not due to until late 2021. I can't remember the exact dates, but 2021, early 2022. So those are underway currently. So the recording of this particular webinar and the slide set will be available on the department's website in a couple of weeks, and the final report in a couple of months. But when available, you can link to either of these from the quick links on our Applied Research and Development webpage as indicated on this slide. And this R&D webpage has additional resources and information related to the CARD program and to CARD research projects that you might want to check out. The address is at the bottom of the slide. Before we wrap up here, I'll just want to thank you again for participating. We really appreciate your interest in CARD projects. And I wanted to take the opportunity to mention another couple of upcoming CARD webinars, 3 upcoming CARD webinars. On May 27th, Cadmus will be back to review the results of an economic impact analysis of the Conservation Improvement Program, which is an update of a 2015 economic analysis that Cadmus also conducted. Then we've got some other ones that are, dates are not fixed yet, but one will be taking a fresh look at cooling loads in Minnesota. And then there'll be 2 others which will report on the results from 2 baseline and market characterization studies, one in the residential sector and the other in the commercial sector. So you can keep abreast of upcoming webinars and other news related to the Conservation Improvement Program in Minnesota by signing up for SIP updates on our email list. You can use the link on this slide to do that. In the meantime, please contact me if you have any questions or feedback or suggestions for the CARD program or CARD webinars, or contact any of us, in particular Adam, if you have a question about this study. Thanks again, and we hope you and your families will continue to be healthy and secure over the upcoming weeks and months, and have a great afternoon. Thanks again for participating.